it was boring because sometimes racing is boring.
It was the best 40 minutes of racing of Valtteri Bottas's life.
I think Lewis isn't entirely innocent.
But now it's just like, if they get too close, they're both off.
What was your view on the sprint race? Because I saw a lot of waffle on Twitter, and it annoyed me, and I have opinions about it.
Yeah, the waffle annoyed you, or the sprint race annoyed you?
The waffle annoyed me.
Ah, interesting. I thought the sprint race was all right. It's weird because it feels like it should be really exciting, but Friday's qualifying I think was more exciting than the sprint race. The sprint race was cool. Like the first few laps were really good. It was nice seeing Daniel make up a few places because he'd qualified in 5th, I think it was. So he managed to jump Lando and get a little bit higher up, and then we had Lewis getting overtaken by quite a few people and having to try and get past Lando. But it just didn't seem quite as exciting as it was in Silverstone. I think it was because everyone's going full tilt. It's maybe a bit harder to overtake. I'm glad they've tried it on a different circuit. I'm intrigued to see them try it again. I kind of feel like it needs to be its own separate thing, though. It feels like this is the second sprint we've done, and it's the second one where Lewis Hamilton's like lost out places. And I'm not saying that it's like sprint racing favours Red Bull or anything like that. Like it is down to sort of driver error and mistakes on his part, but it's a shame that you can qualify so well and then lose out in the race. And it's especially weird this weekend how Bottas qualified at the front of the grid for the sprint, won the sprint, but then Max Verstappen got pole position.
Yeah, it was strange. I didn't realise that went down in like the books, that it's a Max Verstappen pole position. That is weird. I don't know, I never realised that, because I thought like in Monaco, for instance, where Max started, in like the second grid slot, but he was the first car because Charles didn't make the grid. But Charles still gets pole position even though he's not there. He's just did not start. It was all very weird, and like, there are some things that need to be kind of cleared up, I think.
Yeah.
Or just make a bit more common sense.
Especially because at Silverstone they said the winner of the sprint was on pole. So surely Bottas should have been listed as on pole because he did win the sprint.
Yeah.
Even though he then had to take a grid penalty. It was just a bit odd. But what did you think? What was the waffle that annoyed you?
So it was everyone kind of saying, sprint races are awful, let's never do them again. That was boring. Blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't because it was a sprint race. Like, if you compare 18 laps of the sprint race to the first 18 laps of the Grand Prix, they were equally as exciting. Nothing really happened. It was, there was a little bit of a tussle for the lead in the Grand Prix, and there was a bit of drama, whatever. But it wasn't because it was a sprint race that it was boring. It was boring because sometimes racing is boring. Like, it just is. We've sat here and talked about races that we don't want to ever talk about because they were awful. And it's just lap after lap after lap of nothing. And that's what we got in the sprint race. And so it's not sprint racing's fault. It's just a problem with Formula One in general. And that should be solved next year with the new regs. But I hope that we don't lose the chance to do it next year because we had a slightly boring 18 laps in Monza.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it'll all be down to the new regs, or are there any changes to the sprint racing format that you think would help? Like Lando Norris has said that he'd like a super soft, super degradable. Is that a word? Super degrading tyre, so that people maybe can't push us flat out, or maybe have to go in the pits and things. Are there any tweaks like that you'd like to see?
Yeah, they could bring in a tyre one step down from the kind of Grand Prix 3, couldn't they? I don't want them to mess with the grid order. I don't like that idea anymore. I don't, Maybe forcing everyone to start on the same tyre as well.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting for qualifying, is that everyone had to use the softs in every run.
Yeah,
I
was
think
that
that's
the
something they could.
case? Was that the case at the last trial as well? Or was it because that felt different for some reason?
I can't remember. It might have been, because there's no point. Although I feel like the mediums were better in Silverstone anyway, so maybe people were opting for the mediums there. I don't know. I can't remember. But like the faff being stripped out of qualifying is something that is needed, I think.
Yeah, it was. I'm happy they're doing these trials. I'd like to see another trial, and I don't think it'll work at every circuit. That's what's quite nice about like here in Silverstone are very different tracks that we've seen it on. So there's definitely going to be some that it works with and some that it doesn't. So more work needed. I don't think they need to chuck it out. And it also, like I've seen, I can't remember where it was. I saw on Twitter and it was like the viewing figures for Friday practice compared to Friday qualifying, and it was like it was for the US and it was like 70,000 people versus 500,000 people.
Yeah.
So I think that alone is going to make them make some changes. I don't know. I liked it. It was fun.
One of the this had never happened in a million years, but there's kind of this thought of like, don't let it set the grid for qualifying or anything. Like, just do like a sprint series throughout the season. One of the cool things they could do is bring in some young drivers. So a bit like young drivers are racing in free practices, maybe make it so you have 3 sprint races a season and you have to run a young driver in one of them and give them some racing experience rather than just going around the
Just for
track all the time.
practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a rule at the minute, isn't it? That people have to field a young driver in free practice at some point.
Yeah, and I think they're expanding it next season as well
Which
to
would
make
be
it
great.
mandatory.
It'll be great, but there's still not enough seats for all the young drivers. So,
No, but the more
so we'll
opportunity
see.
they get to show their stuff, the better.
True. But so the sprint set the grid for Sunday's race, and despite Bottas winning the sprint, he had an engine penalty, so started at the back, which meant that we had Max Verstappen in pole position, Daniel Ricciardo in second, uh, Lando Norris was third, Lewis was fourth, and then we had Leclerc, Sainz, Giovinazzi, Perez, Stroll, and Alonso making up the top 10. So
Crikey.
I think that was the best thing about it, was that it did give us a really nice mixed up starting grid.
Yeah, it did, but it was also what kind of what we expect. Like, we knew McLaren were going to be strong here, and so maybe it just played into their hands that it just so happened that the sprint race happened this week.
Yeah,
I think they would have possibly been a contender for third and fourth anyway.
And they were on for the win anyway, mate. So everyone lined up on the grid. Gasly started in the pits for some brake issue, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, no, he had a throttle issue.
Or was it the opposite of brakes, I guess? The lights went out, and then Danny had an absolute blinding start and seemed to get past Max on the way into the first corner. Had completed the move by the end of the chicane, and then the rest is history. He just led from then.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next week. Were you kind of surprised to see him take the lead so early on? I thought he was going to be fighting for the win, but I didn't expect to be leading 20 cars from the end of the first lap.
No, it was like, in my head, I can't remember a single race where Max Verstappen's got a decent start. Maybe last weekend in the Netherlands he had a good start, and he pulled off into the distance quite quickly. but he seems to be quite prone to having these terrible starts, and Perez as well.
Hmm.
And we've never really seen the McLarens in that position where they've got no
No.
one ahead of them. And like the only times that Lando is a good starter, but like the last time he had a blinding start, he got taken out by Valtteri Bottas in Hungary. So, I mean, yeah, obviously we were surprised, but it was a scenario that we'd not had forever, I guess.
Yeah.
How excited were you when he pulled into the lead?
I was just so happy because he's had a fair few struggles this year. So having seen him qualify fifth was already pretty good. Like he was only a tiny bit behind Lando, and like he was disappointed with that. I think he thought he was going to be higher up. So then to make up the places in the sprint was great, and then just to see him like stamp his name on the win from the off,
Mm.
I was so happy. And then to see like Lando up there as well. Like obviously Lewis got ahead of Lando off the line, but then later in the race he was there defending again and keeping a 7-time world champion
Yeah.
at bay for quite a few laps. So it was kind of a whole little McLaren bundle of happiness.
Yeah. And it actually seemed like they were where they belong.
Mm.
Like it wasn't like seeing the Alpines at the front with Aston Martin. That was bizarre. But when it was McLaren again, it was like, oh yeah, this feels right.
Yeah, because like a McLaren 1-2 is something that we've seen a lot. Like when we were talking about the history of the Netherlands Grand Prix, the second last race there was a McLaren 1-2, whereas an Alpine win is still something very new.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, new team.
Yeah.
It just sounds wrong.
Yeah, yeah. But so everyone got away, and then we had our first little Hamilton Verstappen tussle. They came out the Curva Grande. Hamilton tried to get around Verstappen. Verstappen pushed him wide. And then, as all that was kicking off, Giovinazzi spun off, lost his fantastic 7th place start, almost took out one of the Ferraris in the process, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, it was his fault, wasn't it? Because he kind of rejoined the track in a dodgy manner. He can't really
Yeah.
come on at the second chicane like he did and just come straight back across the track. That's kind of
Yeah,
why
I
they have
think
that
it was,
runoff, don't they?
and it was how he didn't even like stay on the right hand side. He just went straight across the track. Didn't really look out to see if anyone was there. So that was a
It's
shame.
a shame
So I would have
because
quite liked to see what he could have done from 7th.
yeah, I think I was certainly getting ready to like eat my words about what we've said about him over the last few weeks and months because he had a great qualifying. He kept it up in the sprint race, and all the signs were kind of pointing towards him scoring Alpha's first points and doing it in style.
Yeah.
But no,
No, it was not to be. Shocking home race for him, really, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. But then, yeah, like you said with the sprint, we sort of got into a little rhythm after that first lap madness. And that kind of carried on with everyone kind of sitting in line until the pit stops, when it all kicked off after a very slow stop for Red Bull. Like, as soon as it didn't even look like a wheel got stuck. It just seemed like he was there forever. And there comes
yeah.
a point when you're just like, this is too long for a pit stop. It's like a retirement. It was
Yeah.
like 11.1 seconds, I think.
So did they officially say what it was, or are we just assuming it was the sensors?
I haven't seen anything saying the cause. Like at the time, I think the commentary team said there was something wrong with one of the wheel guns. But then when you watch it back, you see them all put them on and then come back
Yeah.
ready for the car to go.
So the wheel
So,
guns all have sensors that are connected to the traffic lights. So when the wheel gun registers that the nut is tight enough, it triggers a sensor which sends a signal, and once it gets all 4 signals, it makes the green light appear and the driver goes off. And that's what they've just changed, because they now hold them for 1/10 of a second before that light changes for some reason. And what seemed to have happened was the sensor just hadn't been triggered by that front right tyre gunner because
Okay.
someone like tapped him on the shoulder and was like, "You need to do it again,"
Yeah.
and he did, and then it changed.
And then it went off.
Um, but it's just a case of overcomplicating things, isn't it? Like, just put your hand up and go. Like, do it old-fashioned style. Put your hand up and let's get the spinny lollipops back.
Yeah, I think they brought it in because, I mean, the examples I can think of were like the Haas pit stops from 2019, where they sent both cars out and one after the other a wheel came off. So I guess it's to stop issues like that from repeating themselves.
Kimi last year in Austria as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's another one. So there have been a few little mistakes. Like, I can understand being cautious, but if that's what it was that resulted in such a slow stop for him, be livid. Because he had his really slow stop, and then a few laps later, Lewis came in and had like a slightly slow stop. I've got down that it was 4.2 seconds. And because of Max's slow stop, that then brought Lewis out level with him.
Before we talk about it, let's give some credit to Lando because Lando didn't let Lewis. Well, I guess it's kind of the slow stop, but Lando didn't let Lewis overcut him, and he managed to
No.
regain the position in the pits.
Yeah, because Lewis got past Lando when Max was pitting,
Yeah,
and then Lando kept his position ahead, which is just more brilliance for McLaren. Just because they got fastest pit stop as well from the weekend, so none of this 4.2 second rubbish.
that's what really
Perfection
counts.
all round. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Lewis came out just behind Lando. Max was just behind him. Into the first corner, Max went wide, well, around the outside. And then, depending on who you ask, Lewis didn't leave enough space for Max to come out. Their rear wheels connected. Max hit the curb and then ended up on top of Lewis. Whose fault was it?
It's easy to say it now because the penalties have been given, etc., etc. But I think it was Max's fault. I think Lewis isn't entirely innocent,
No.
but Max should have cut the corner, let Lewis have the position, try again in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and like both that first chicane and the second one at Monza, I feel like they're the corners where you see the most people trying moves and then cutting the corner or not making the braking zone. It's just something that you kind of associate with Monza. Well, at least I do. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you can't make the corner, you go off. And it looked like Max wasn't going to make the corner, so I don't understand why he didn't go off.
I think it's part of that like elbows out mentality that he's got, isn't it? That he
Yeah.
hasn't really. He showed it at Imola, didn't he? Where Lewis cut the corner, and yeah, you don't really see Max concede very often.
No. And I think that's why it is now twice that the two of them have come together in calamitous style, because Lewis isn't going to win if he always gives in when Max tries to shimmy him out the way.
Yeah,
But
and it's fantastic to watch. But I wish we got a little bit more. We haven't had any wheel to wheel with them recently.
no, there was quite a few, like, was it Bahrain at the start of the year where they both got quite dicey and that was really exciting to watch. But now it's just like, if they get too
Well,
close, they're both off.
it was so good it even made Paul Ricard a good race.
I know. That's madness. Maybe that's it. We need to wait for the boring circuits again. So
Well,
Sochi,
it is Russia next.
Sochi might be great, yeah.
Who do you think was to blame then?
Like, I would have, when it first happened, I was just like, racing incident was kind of unavoidable. Just leave it be. But probably think Max should have given a bit more space. I don't understand why a curb can lift a car up onto another car, though. That feels like something that needs tweaking. But then I don't know if it's just because of the way like the rear wheels bashed, if like they spun each other up, or who knows. they'll probably send Alex Albon out to recreate it next week. So we'll find out then. I thought it was kind of interesting and maybe a bit telling that after the Silverstone crash, Christian Horner and all the Red Bull team were like, it's Lewis's fault, it's Lewis's fault, sack him. And after this one, they were like, it's probably just a racing incident, these things happen. Like, yeah, racing incident. Rather than trying to pass the blame off. So I guess maybe they themselves thought Max was a little more to blame. And they're not appealing the penalty either.
I said that to some people at work. I was like, as soon as he didn't say it was Lewis's fault, you kind of knew that it was Max's fault.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite the giveaway.
Yeah.
But that obviously made the race quite exciting. Big question. Do you think Daniel Ricciardo would still have won if they hadn't crashed?
Oh. That is a toughie. I can't remember how far. I'm assuming he was about 10 seconds ahead, right?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think
kind
he
of
would have
feel
lost a
like-
10-second lead.
And I think those two, if they'd both still been running, would have spent so long trying to overtake each other.
And Lando.
Yeah, and Lando. That he probably would have secured his win even more.
Yeah. Because he's also going to eventually start getting lapped traffic between them. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that it didn't happen that way because I think the second half of this race was so much more exciting than the first.
Yeah.
And one of the best, maybe 40 minutes of racing of the year.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and I also think it was the best 40 minutes of racing of Valtteri Bottas's life. Like, what is it about drivers finding out they've not got a seat and then just being perfect?
Yes.
So I mean, I guess actually maybe most of his good moves were before this, but the crash brought out the safety car, and after the safety car went in, Bottas was in 6th, having started in 20th, and like the majority of those positions were gained by overtaking people rather than handy safety car pit stop. So after years of him always moaning about being stuck behind people, there he was just ploughing through the field. I loved it.
And
like, part of me was like Bottas for driver of the day, but then I remembered Ricciardo was going to win and he's the best. So
yeah, it was close though. It was close. I don't know who I would have voted for because Bottas deserved the recognition for his performance all weekend. But it was quite telling given that last year, this exact race, Bottas was 5th or 6th. And we were all talking about, the Mercedes, it's not designed to overtake. It's not designed to sit behind other cars. That's why he's struggling so much. And then Lewis fell to the back of the pack and caught him up straight away.
Yeah.
Whereas this, there's something inside him this week, that just, he remembered how to drive.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if it is to do with not having that pressure of trying to perform every weekend and prove that he's the driver for the seat, whereas now he can just be like, yeah, I know what I'm doing for the next few years. Just relax into it more.
Who are some other drivers that need that?
Who are some other drivers that need that? I mean, I feel like Perez is in danger of falling into a similar position because he's not shone as brightly as I would have hoped.
No. He had the opportunity this week, and he kind of blew it, didn't he?
Did he have the opportunity, though? Because he was, sacrificed so Max would get a better qualifying position.
But in the race, in this second half of the race, he was directly behind. He was on the podium.
That's true, that's true.
Well, no. He was 4th, and he took 3rd place illegally.
Yeah. And it was weird that he made basically the same move and the same mistake in the sprint race.
Yeah.
He overtook someone on that on the chicane, did give the place back, but then this time he didn't give it back quick enough. And we got
I
another
get
little Red Bull to FIA communication. I love them. I think that's the best graphic based thing they've brought in this year.
I think we should have an Engineer of the Day award for the best engineer on the radio.
Yeah, I quite like that.
I understand why he didn't give the place back in the end, though, and took the penalty instead.
How
Because
and why is that?
having him in third and eventually stopping Bottas getting to the second and first positions, which, let's just say, if Bottas would have won that race, that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But Perez kind of stuck there and stopped him gaining more points on Red Bull. So you knew Perez was going to drop down the order and gain measly points. And what you're doing is stopping Bottas, because there are much bigger jumps when you get onto the rostrum.
Mm-hmm.
And he's stopping Mercedes make like 6 points in one position on Red Bull.
That's interesting. And I guess that does fall back into Perez is purely there as a team player. He's there to help them win a world championship. Yeah, I didn't realise that. Nice little tactical insight there.
And it's brilliant that we're talking about a title battle with 8 races left, and we're literally talking about like 6 points in the constructors. Like, it's mad.
Yeah.
Well, it's maybe not 6 points in the constructors, but it's close enough. Oh, it's juicy, isn't it?
Yeah. I saw something that said if we have exactly the same result every weekend till the end of the year, Daniel Ricciardo will win the championship by 62 points. Also, I had a question. Because of the sprint points and the fastest lap points and the new way of points being given out, does Daniel Ricciardo now hold the record for the most points won on a single race weekend?
Yeah, he must do.
Because he got third place in the sprint, point there, point for fastest lap, and then 25 points for winning. So the only way you get more is if you won the sprint and then won the race.
Lewis, second in the sprint in Silverstone.
Oh, yeah.
And he won the race, and he might have got fastest lap.
Oh, man.
Let me have
Another record for Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis, yeah, he won the race. Lewis. Oh, Sergio Perez got the fastest lap.
Ah.
But on the sprint...
Oh, so they'll be tied then.
Yeah, they both got 27.
27 points.
It's not a bad record to have.
No. Probably the only record he's going to be tied with Lewis Hamilton for.
No, he'll just have to go and beat him in Brazil.
Yeah.
If that ever happens.
If it does. But yeah, so Perez got his penalty for a shady move. Bottas then stuck behind him. So when they crossed the line, Perez finished third, but had to give up the place to Bottas, who was then on the podium, alongside Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. It was very exciting.
Incredible.
And that's like 4 different winners for 4 different Italian Grand Prix, I think.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And
4 different teams as well.
Yeah. And Ricciardo's the 12th different driver to stand on the podium this year.
That's nuts. 8 different teams as well.
Yeah. More than half the grid have had a podium.
We really need Robert Kubica to step up his game.
He was good. Like, he only finished a smidge off Giovinazzi. To say that Giovinazzi qualified 7th.
Can we also... We've not even mentioned, and this is absolutely crazy that it's taken us half an hour of recording, George Russell finished 9th.
I know!
He got into the points, and it's hardly been mentioned.
We're just so used to it now.
Yeah.
Points finishes on 3 out of the last 4 races.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you happy now as well?
Season.
Because... Yeah, for sure. Are you happy now? Because after George got his points in Hungary, you were like, "Oh, I just want him to win it in a normal race."
Yeah,
Does this count? Excellent.
yeah. I don't
He
think
can,
Belgium counted, but this definitely counts.
okay. He can leave Formula One with a seal of approval from Will Longman.
George Russell is 3 points behind Yuki Tsunoda in the championship. This is the real fight.
Yeah.
This is the real fight I want to be keeping an eye on. Forget this Verstappen stuff. Tsunoda Russell. Thank you for watching our review of the Italian Grand Prix. Was it the best race of the year? Maybe. It's going to be a very interesting. The fact that we'll be able to do a top 10 countdown at the end of this season of the actual top 10 races and none of them be rubbish is quite a privileged position to be in. Anyway, that's for a few weeks down the line. We'll be back next week with another episode of Friday Formula. If you want to catch it, you can hit subscribe, and while you're there, hit the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter, where we'll let you know when the next episode comes out, and we also have personal Twitters. You can follow me. I'm at Will Longman, and Owen is...
I'm at Owen_Belwood.
And that is it for another week. So we will catch you on Friday next week, where we'll be talking about motor racing. We'll see you then.
As you said it, I was like, does he know what we're talking about? Do I not know?